Hello, I'm Raider Pilot Steve, and here is my review for the Duxford American Flying Day 2026, held at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford Aerodrome. This was the third of 3 flying days held at Duxford, and this one was themed around American aviation, with a variety of vintage aircraft, as well as some visitors from the modern United States Air Force. The weather on the day was very hot and sunny, and everything that was due to fly did so. All the photos featured in this video were taken by me and can be viewed on my Flickr page, which I have linked below. There was a wide variety of aircraft out on display all over the showground. First of all, outside of the Fighter Collections hangar was their gleaming silver Curtiss P-40C Tomahawk 2B, which has not flown in some time, though I am very much looking forward to seeing it in the air once again. This P-40 was delivered to the United States Army Air Force in 1941, but would later be sent to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease scheme, and would remain in Russia until the 1990s. Just behind the P-40 was Fighter Aviation Engineering Limited's Hawker Fury FB-11, which was outside temporarily while certain flying display aircraft were brought out of the hangar. This aircraft was originally built for the Iraqi Air Force in 1953 and is now marked up as the prototype aircraft SR-661. Just down from the two fighters was Peter Kinsey's rare Levere Cosmic Wind Ballerina. This aircraft is a genuine racing champion, having won the King's Cup Air Race in 1964, as well as being one of only 6 built. At roughly the centre point of the showground was another collection of static aircraft just outside of one of the main hangars. Among this group of aircraft was a pair of World War I replicas operated by Jaster Binks Aviation. These are the brightly coloured Fokker D7 and Fokker DR1, which are both painted to represent the aircraft flown by flying aces Lieutenant Rudolf Stark and Manfred von Richthofen, respectively. Behind the Fokkers, careful now, was a lovely blue de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II, which flew with No. 7 Elementary Flying Training School throughout World War II and would later serve as a pilot trainer with the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm after the war. The last 3 aircraft in this section all fit into the American theme of the show. These included a rare Aeroncar O-58B Grasshopper and a pair of Piper L4 Grasshoppers, in this case an L4H and an L4J. All these aircraft represent the important tasking of liaison and observation aircraft during the Second World War. Nearby the main control tower was the Blenheim Society, who had bought out their Bristol Blenheim cockpit for visitors to get a closer look. I am pretty sure this cockpit represents a Blenheim Mark IV. The main flight line along the runway had a large selection of aircraft that were not part of the show but were still viewable to the show's visitors. At the eastern end of the runway was a stunning sight and definitely not fitting to the American show theme. This was the iconic shape of Fubar Aviation's PZL Milik Lim 5, the Polish-built version of the Mikołaj Gurewicz MiG-17F Fresco. I would be seeing this jet fly the next day at the Shuttlesworth Summer Air Show. Sorry, spoilers, stay tuned. But it was great to be able to see this jet up close on the ground. Next to the MiG-17 was the bright red de Havilland Canada DHC-6 Twin Otter from the British Antarctic Survey. This aircraft is not exactly a common sight at air shows but does stay over at Duxford semi-frequently. It is nicknamed Ice Cold Katie. Unusually, we also had a second example of the Twin Otter on the other end of the airfield. This all-white example was actually from the French Air and Space Force and serves with Escadron de Transport 3-61, Poitou, and is based at Orleans-Bricy Air Base. This was an unexpected and rare visitor to a UK airshow and was certainly a highlight for the enthusiasts, me included. There was further vintage and general aviation aircraft to view along the flight line, including a de Havilland Canada Chipmunk T-10 in a silver Royal Air Force training scheme, Peter Kuiper's Beechcraft D-17S Staggerwing, resplendent in a military liaison scheme of an aircraft from No. 24 Squadron, a de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II, which is painted to represent a Tiger Moth that was assigned to the United States Army Air Force, a pair of Supermarine Spitfires operated by Fighter Aviation Engineering Limited. This included an LF-5C, which wears authentic markings and camouflage from No. 129 Mysore Squadron. The other was an FR-14E, which now wears authentic Royal Indian Air Force markings, denoting its post-war service. A Champion 7GC-BC Citabria, a high-wing monoplane which is capable of certain aerobatic stresses. The Diamond DA-40 Diamond Star, a light aircraft made from composite materials. And finally, a locally based Yakovlev Yak-52, which would later depart prior to the flying display. It was now time to kick off the flying display. This was opened by an unusual combination, which saw the Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B fly in formation with Comanche Fighter LLC's Supermarine Spitfire Mark I and the Fighter Collection's Curtiss P-40F Kitty Hawk Mark II Lee's Hope. After a single pass, the trio separated into two sections. First came the B-17 for its solo display, which actually began with a smoking orbit to pay tribute to Danny Owen, a B-17 Preservation Limited volunteer who sadly passed away prior to this event. This was then followed by the Spitfire and Kitty Hawk, which performed a series of tail chases. This display represented the American airmen who contributed to the war effort both prior and after their country joined the Second World War in Europe. The Spitfire was particularly notable as it is painted to represent the RAF Eagle squadrons, which featured American airmen who left the United States to fight in the early years of the war. Next came the last display of the Commemorative Air Force's French Wings Piper J3C-65 Cub, which was now concluding its small UK tour for the 2026 season. The Little Blue Cloud, which represents an NE-1 of the United States Navy, performed a small solo display, which is a bit far out at times, but represented the American theme well. More potent American engineering then took to the air in the form of probably the most iconic American fighter of the Second World War, the North American P-51 Mustang. This particular example was a P-51D called Marinelle, which is owned and operated by Isabel Rutland, who put on a very spirited performance which featured lots of the Mustang whistle that we all love to hear. The next display segment revolved around the heavies present at the show. This included Plain Sailing's Canadian Vickers PBV-1A Canzo A and Fighter Aviation Engineering Limited's Lockheed 12A Electra Jr. They began their display with a loose formation pass before moving on to their own individual displays. This sequence also represented types that were developed in the late 30s and would later be used for the surveillance role prior and during the Second World War. Another very potent piston type was the Fighter Collection's Grumman F-8F Bearcat, which put on an impressive aerobatic routine with lots of powerful vertical climbs and rolling manoeuvres. This Bearcat is also a very famous Duxford resident, as it was one of the 3 original aircraft purchased by Stephen Gray, which went on to form the nucleus of the Fighter Collection in the 1980s. The penultimate display and the last warbirds of the show came together for a dogfight demonstration. This set piece wasn't the usual dogfight though. Yes, we had the aircraft restoration company's Hispano-Buchon playing the role of a Messerschmitt Bf-109, but its adversary was Fighter Aviation Engineering Limited's Republic P-47D Thunderbolt Nellie B, rather than the usual Spitfire or Hurricane. The pair flew a particularly exciting routine with the Thunderbolt somewhat dwarfing the Buchon and was concluded when the American fighter shot down the enemy aircraft. The American flying days were often opened by the modern United States Air Force, but this time they had the honour of closing the show. We once again had the 48th Fighter Wing at RAF Lakenheath to thank for their participation, as they provided a quartet of their fast jets. This included a pair of McDonnell Douglas F-15E Strike Eagles from the 494th Fighter Squadron, nicknamed the Panthers, and a pair of Lockheed Martin F-35A Lightning IIs from the 493rd Fighter Squadron, nicknamed the Grim Reapers. The four ship arrived and separated before performing a series of individual passes, which, rather than being flat passes, were actually quite impressive and included various topsides, wing waggling, gear down passes, and some noisy zoom climbs to conclude their appearance. One of the F-15Es was also sporting some nose art from its time out in the Middle East during the recent conflicts in the 2026 Iran war. In conclusion, the Duxford American Flying Day 2026 was a lovely event with some great displays in some great weather. If you are a fan of American warbirds, I would definitely recommend this event. Despite having a flying display that was less than 2 hours long, it was packed with high quality displays. I personally thought that the solo Mustang and the dogfight sequence with the Buchon and Thunderbolt were particularly entertaining, and it is always great to see the United States Air Force's assets being thrown around Duxford's airspace. If you wish to see more of my photos from this event and others, I've linked my Flickr page in the description below. You may also wish to follow me on Instagram, where I post aviation content frequently. My next review will be the Shuttleworth Summer Air Show 2026, which took place the day after this show. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I hope you will join me in the next one. Bye!